Okay, so here's a little video of the difference between a nitro engine and a diesel RC engine. Obviously you can see we've got a whole host of chemicals in front of us here. Let me get into what those are. We got nitro, kerosene, castor oil, cetane improver, ether, and some RC diesel, which is clear, roughly yellowish color. Anyways, let's get into this. Right. Okay, let's start with the nitros here. Okay, so here's a nitro engine. Which was a 12E engine, HPI. So a nitro engine works on the principle of, we have the fuel here, which is a mixture of nitromethane and methanol, and assorted oils, whether they be petroleum, castor oil, or synthetic. And you have your cylinder and piston, which is a ringless piston, with your cylinder, ports in and such, which is a tapered bore. So that means your cylinder or your piston can only fit so far through the bore. And if your piston does that, your cylinder is worn out. Same with your piston. You need to repinch or a new piston and sleeve. Anyways, so how these work, hang on just a second. So how these work, as you can see, there's a glow plug glowing there. It's got my glow igniter attached to the cylinder with a glow plug in it. So how that works is, when the engine starts, or when you start the engine, you put the glow plug in there, glow plug igniter in there, you light the glow plug, and the methanol in the fuel here creates a catalytic reaction, just like in your car, in the catalytic converter. And what happens is it causes that glow plug to glow red hot continuously while the engine is running, which sustains the engine running. That's how a glow engine works. Hence the name glow, because the engine is actually glowing on the inside. If you look at one of these engines running without an exhaust, you'll actually see the engine glowing bright orange inside that exhaust port. Moving on, we have diesels. Here's a diesel. Notice there's no glow plug. There's a compression adjustment here. That's what the screw is for. You can screw that up or down. So how these work, if we compare the pistons, here's a piston out of a glow engine. Note what it looks like. Here's a piston out of a diesel. Notice the top, look at the difference of it. See how that one's flat? That's the nitro piston. See how that one's got a dome on it? That's a diesel piston for high compression. Now if we look at the cylinder, we have an intake ports, we have an exhaust port, transfer ports, all that stuff. So we look at the diesel cylinder. Unfortunately, I cannot get the headpiece off the cylinder itself, and my focus is really terrible on this camera. We have an exhaust port here, exhaust port here, and exhaust port here, and if we look inside, all those slots are transfer ports to move the air-fuel mixture into the combustion chamber. And if you see the combustion chamber, there's no glow plug inside there. There's just nothing. There's just a convex-shaped piece of steel. Now how these work is the ether and the ignition improver have a very low ignition temperature. Same with kerosene. And there's so much compression inside that cylinder that the fuel, when you compress anything, gets hotter. So what happens is that fuel and air mixture is being compressed and squeezed really hard, and it reaches its auto ignition temperature where it automatically ignites, is what happens, forcing the piston back down. Sorry for the lighting, this is all I've got right now. And when you turn this screw down, the more you turn it down, the more you're pushing that steel plug inside the cylinder head down. And the more you push that down, it's coming closer to the top of the piston, increasing the compression ratio, which increases the power. So if you watch any of these videos on YouTube and you see somebody, this is a fuel mixture, so you hear the engine running, and they turn this screw here, and the more you turn it down, the faster it runs, because you're increasing the compression ratio. Just like your 350 Chevy, if you go from your low compression smogger heads and you put a set of high compression heads on there, you notice it has more power because you're sorry, having a hard time speaking. I'm very, very tired. Increasing your compression ratio. So the smaller the area you can set that explosion off in, the more power you're going to have, the tighter the bang. So that's how these work. And no, you cannot put nitro fuel in a diesel. It will not start because it does not have a low enough ignition temperature. And a lot of people have asked me if you can put RC diesel mixture in a glow engine like that. Will it work? It might kind of pop and fire a little bit, but it doesn't really work. I have seen people get airplane motors started with just kerosene and castor, but you have to preheat the engine quite to a high temperature, around 200 degrees, for it to actually want to burn. And it's very hard. The engine will detonate. It's just not good. Don't ever do it. It's just, no, please don't. Glow engines are meant for glow fuel. Diesel engines are meant for diesel. It's one of those things. So the fuel mixtures, oftentimes the glow fuel, I used to make it myself, and the fuel mixture would be 70% methanol, 20% nitro, 10% castor oil. This castor oil in particular is what I used in my glow engines. It's amazing. And with your diesel RC engines, the fuel mixture I use is 35% kerosene, 20% castor oil, 20%, oh, sorry, forget that, 35% kerosene, 30% castor oil, 30% ether, and then 5% ignition improver, is what I meant to say. Sorry, I was thinking of, about glow fuel. Sorry guys, it's been a long day, I'm tired, I haven't had enough coffee. Maybe I had too many of those. Anyways, but there's just kind of a look. If you're wondering, the bottom end of a diesel is not any different from the bottom end of a glow engine. They're basically the same. The components, the crankshaft might be a little bit thicker. The crank pin might be thicker. The connecting rod might be thicker. If you look right here, you'll see the diesel connecting rod versus the glow engine connecting rod. Stupid thing doesn't want to focus. Okay, there we go. You'll see obviously this one's much thicker than this one is. That's because of the high compression ratio. If you often try to diesel a glow engine, it just won't last. I mean, the crown of the piston, or the head of the piston itself, the thickness between here is not very thick, and it'll get very hot and it'll crack eventually, and then it'll just be the end of it. Where the diesel has a steel piston, which is obviously much heavier. You notice it has that big dome on top of it to increase the compression ratio. And there's much more thickness between the crown of the piston and that dome top there and underneath, so it can withstand all those hard explosions. It's just like the Cox 049 diesel. I mean, it was never designed as a diesel. It should never have been. It was just a horrible design. It was a horrible idea. It never worked. I've tried in my hand at Cox 049 diesels lots, and it was terrible. Just don't ever do it. Don't waste your money. I've seen lots of people on YouTube with videos that worked, The engine's working on diesel, but they have a short lifespan. They break crankshafts, break connecting rods, wear the pistons out. It's not worth it. Leave your glow engines to glow fuel and your diesels to diesel. It's just the way it is. But for those of you that wanted to know the difference and didn't quite understand, basically there it is. This section here, minus that guy, this section here uses a glow plug to ignite the methanol for a catalytic reaction to keep the engine running. This side here with the diesels uses nothing but compression to light the fuel. No glow plugs, no grid heaters, no fuel injection, no nothing like that. Only compression. Just like some of the really old Detroit two-stroke diesels. They used ether start, so the engine would be cranking over really fast, and they'd have a little squirter nozzle in the blower somewhere. They'd squirt some ether in there and it'd ignite and help the engine to get going. You know, this is kind of the same idea, kind of. It's a variable compression engine. Mazda, I think, is doing something like this now with gasoline engines where it's variable compression. They think it's new technology when, you know, this engine is 1979. This technology has been around since the 1930s, so it's nothing new. You know, they're just reliving an old concept to see if it'll work. And I'd like to see it work, but who knows what's going to happen. Anyways, just I thought I'd make this video for you guys to see between the diesel crowd and the nitro crowd. Anyways, guys, take it easy.